I want to welcome everybody to the Rainbow Bridge Involvement Group meeting again. For many of you, I think you've probably been with us before, but if you're new to this, welcome. Happy to have you, and we're excited about this process. We have a lot to show you today, so let's get right into it. I want to start with introducing some team members here. My name is Jason Brinkman. I'm the district engineer for Southwest Idaho for the Idaho Transportation Department. And we're sponsoring this project on Highway 55 that's looking at a replacement for the Rainbow Bridge. With me today, I've got Dan Gorley. Dan is my design construction engineer that has this project specifically, and a number of other exciting projects around the region right now that are under construction or in design. Dan McCaffrey is with me. Dan McCaffrey is with Majesty and Masters, and he's our bridge lead on this project. So he's got all of the detailed technical portions of the project, and we appreciate his skills and abilities in that regard. Also with me today, Rosemary Curtain. I'll have Rosemary do a little bit of the logistics here in a minute. She keeps all of us lined out, so appreciate what Rosemary does for us. Put it back into the record here, or for anybody that's new, the bridge that we're talking about is this deck arch bridge, we call it, more commonly known as the Rainbow Bridge. This is a 1933 bridge structure, concrete bridge over the North Fork of the Payette River. Of course, we're in Valley County, so this is getting down closer to Smiths Ferry, as you all know. We are working to determine not only what new bridge will be built there, but what we're going to do with the existing bridge. And if you drove that way today, or if you're familiar, we're doing a little work right now on the existing bridge. That's keeping that preserved and going in the interim. So we'll talk more about that, as well as what we have coming for the new bridge. Purpose of today's meeting, this is our second in a series of meetings on this. We're going to provide you a project update with where we're at. And we've had a lot of work going on in the background over about the last year approximately now. And we've got a lot to share with you about what we've discovered and what we've come up with to date. The first thing we're going to want to talk about are some scenarios for what to do with the existing bridge. That is something that weighs heavily on our mind, and something that we definitely want to talk with you about. We have confirmed the location of the new bridge. There were some questions about where exactly it should go as we investigated the geology of the area, the rocks, and the feasibility of putting it where we had proposed to, and we'll show you where we've come up with for that. We're especially excited to share with you some design options for the new bridge. There are, I believe, 9 alternatives that we're going to share with you today. In bridge design, that's a lot. And I think they're pretty exciting. I think you're going to like what we've come up with, and we'll let Dan share that with you as well. There's also 3 different options for what we would do with the retaining walls that are going to be needed adjacent to the bridge. So we'll share with you what we're looking at for a retaining wall system and how we might finish that as well. And then most importantly, you're here today because we want your input. And so please share with us in the course of the meeting your thoughts. We'll invite you to specifically comment or leave your thoughts with us at the end of the day as well. So I'll ask Rosemary to cover just a little bit of the housekeeping.
No housekeeping. Restrooms are out the store to the right and to the right. If there's an emergency, you see the door to exit. Everything is at your tables. If you could find a sign-in sheet, we just need your name. I think all of you have been contacted by our office, so if you will sign in and let us know that you are here. We also have extra copies of the PowerPoint, so if you want a copy of the PowerPoint and there's not enough, let us know. And one thing I do want to call your attention to, we are having a public meeting. This group will meet, but we will do an invitation to the general public to get the same information, and the postcards are there for you to have. It will be sent tomorrow. The format of this meeting, we're going to give you a lot of information. There is a blue comment sheet on your table that is the first comment sheet we will have. We will pause and ask you to record some thoughts. And then as we go through these 9 bridge options at the end, it's a lot of information, so we're going to give you a book of those, and we welcome you to stay at this room as long as you would like tonight to go through those and give us some comments on those. So we'll give you all the information, and then we're going to step aside and let you take your time going through those books and answer comments.
So you have some things on your table. Like Rosemary said, we're going to hand out some more exhibits here in a little bit that'll have a lot more of the options in them, and those will be yours to review and to take with you. SHPO is with us today, the State Historic Preservation Office, and we appreciate their time and interest here. I understand they also have some posters or exhibits that they can pass around, and so we'd love to share those with you as well, as far as the history of the existing bridge.
On your tables is a poster and a sticker. Every year we do a poster for Idaho Historic Preservation and Archaeology Month. And so we chose to spotlight the Rainbow Bridge this year, held a contest, and an artist drew her depiction of the Rainbow Bridge. There are more in the back if you didn't get one.
Let's talk schedule for just a minute. We had our introductory meeting just about a year ago in Cascade. We are here today for this second meeting. So this is where we'll share, as I mentioned, those options for the existing bridge, plus the design options for the new bridge and walls. We are planning on another meeting later this year. We're calling that fall time frame. And at that meeting, we'll share with you some decisions that will be made by that point as far as which way we're going to go with the new bridge and if there's any follow-up with regard to that existing bridge. So look forward to another meeting fall time frame this year. We will have a fourth meeting. It'll be in conjunction with what we call our final design. So as we're finalizing some of the details, and by that point, we'll know more about the detailed construction schedule or phasing of how this will actually come together. And that one is yet to be scheduled, but I would anticipate that one to be sometime perhaps 2026 or beyond as we look forward to moving toward the construction phase of the project. Rosemary mentioned the public open house. We are holding that on July 22nd, so that's coming up here in just a couple of weeks. That meeting will be back in Cascade at the American Legion, and we'd invite any of the public that wants to come and interact with us in person to do that there. We will simultaneously be holding an online public meeting, so you'll be able to see all the materials and review the content online. And of course, you can leave us comments or questions at both places. The project has a website, which is available there for you as well. And we'll publicize that here in conjunction with the public meeting coming up. So please help us get the word out, share that with anybody interested. We love your feedback and comment on this, and we're hoping to reach a broad group of folks. As far as what we've been up to, since July a year ago, we have done a substantial amount of technical work. So anytime we look at a bridge over a body of water, we have to do what we call hydraulics. That's the study of the flow of the river, the size of the flow, and how that interacts with the bridge. We have been working on the environmental process. We've kicked off the initial investigations and disclosures that we'll need to do to get through the environmental documentation of the process and ultimately the permitting. We have gotten input from you and from the community over the last year. The location, as I mentioned, of the new bridge just upstream or westerly of the existing bridge has been confirmed, and you'll be able to see exactly what that looks like in some of our exhibits here soon. So that location did work and did prove to be the best location for the bridge. There was some question about the hillside and things. It did bear out that it will work to put it where we had proposed to do. We have also completed now a fairly detailed investigation and evaluation of the existing bridge. We know quite a bit about that structure, both from what we can physically inspect and the work that we are doing and have done on it, and we'll get into the details of that here today as well. And then, of course, we've developed the design alternatives for the new bridge. Now, 9 concepts is a lot. They are not all detailed designs at this phase, but we know enough about them to say that they are feasible alternatives and that they would be a good fit for the canyon at this location. So everything that we'll show you today are things that we could feasibly move forward. There will be opportunities to tweak elements of them, certainly railings or other details, but we'll show you call it the macro or the major form of the different bridge options at this phase. Here's kind of the overall time frame of this bridge. We started these discussions back in 2021 as far as the feasibility of replacing the bridge. This process really kicked off, though, about a year ago in 2024. We are now at the point where we're doing this round of engagement, and we're, now in the presence of a lot more information of, technical nature and analysis. We will take the information from this meeting today and from the upcoming public meeting, and we will be making some final decisions, and then we will move that final bridge design selection into what we call final design. So that's where we will do all of the detailed calculations and drawings and specifications that will all be needed for the selected alternative to move into a construction package. So that'll take place over the remainder of 2025 and 2026, all in anticipation of a construction year which is currently scheduled for 2028. So 2028 sounds a little bit distant. I have to keep reminding myself that's only 3 years from now, and in highway years, time flies. So it'll be right around the corner. I'm confident. I did mention the maintenance project that's going on now. We have that bridge currently utilizing one lane on Monday through Thursday. So we are staying out of weekend traffic. The bridge is open to 2 lanes Friday through Sunday and on holidays. So this past 4th of July weekend proved to be quite busy, but we are keeping that open for the busiest days of the week. That work is progressing as scheduled. We're making good progress on it, and that work is really with the intent of repairing the elements of the existing structure that are necessary to keep this in its operable condition, both until construction and through the construction period. So we aren't doing anything right now that is meant for long-term preservation. The current repairs are really just focused on getting to and through the construction period, and then we'll decide what comes after that. We've at this point pretty firmly established the need for a new bridge. So one of the things that we did starting clear back in the feasibility study was look at whether the existing structure could meet standards or could be modified to, or whether it could be any way incorporated into a bridge that would last for the next 50 to 75 years. And the conclusion was that it could not. Not only is the structure deteriorated just because of the effect of age and weather and traffic on the concrete and things, but we have increased the size and the number of vehicles and the loadings that we put on the bridge compared to when it was designed almost 100 years ago. And so the conclusion is that the existing bridge is not serviceable for the long term, and thus the need for a new bridge. That also gives us the opportunity to address the very tight curves coming on and off of the bridge, which really slow traffic and create some kind of close calls getting on and off that bridge sometimes if you've got 2 RVs meeting, or if you are lucky enough to get to drive one of our 12-foot wide snowplows across it. So we're looking forward to having just a little bit more space to get on and off of the bridge, and there was no way to accommodate that with the existing structure. We do really appreciate the comments and the feedback that we've gotten. What we have heard thus far is a fairly diverse set of opinions about what to do with the existing bridge. We know there are some that definitely are interested in seeing its long-term preservation. We have a soft spot for this bridge as well, and we certainly enjoy seeing it and observing it. We also know that and the comments have borne this out, there's a high interest in the aesthetics of the new bridge. So we've heard that you care about what the new bridge looks like. We've put extra effort into developing those alternatives with a mind for aesthetics. And what I can tell you from discussing the 9 that you're going to see today is that everybody has a little different eye for these things. So what I might like, or what my bridge engineer might like, or somebody I meet on the street, they're not all the same. So we are definitely interested in getting your feedback on what makes the best bridge for this location, what elements you like or do not like. And there's some quite different styles here that I'm going to have Dan McCaffrey go into. So with that, we know you also have concerns about traffic impacts. We are very concerned about that as well. I think this bridge location is set up to be about as favorable for building a new bridge as we can, and that we will get to use the existing bridge during construction, but know that we are very mindful of that. We want to keep traffic moving, and we definitely will commit to doing that. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dan, and I'm going to have him go into the assessment of the existing bridge.
Thanks, Jason. As you mentioned, we did do a pretty thorough evaluation of the existing bridge, really with the goal of understanding what it would take to make it last a little bit longer. We know it's not going to carry traffic, but what is the future going to be for the bridge? What is the future going to be for the bridge? We do have copies of the report available. We could email it to you as well, but I know there's a couple of them here. So what did we do? The first thing that we did was compare it to the 2006 condition to what we have now. The reason why 2006 is because there was a pretty major rehab that happened at that time, including some state-of-the-art chloride extraction on the ribs. So we have a nice report from that time period that included a lot of photos that documented what the bridge looked like. So we purposely took some similar photos of the bridge today to be able to compare how have things changed, how are things progressing, what does it look like. Another visual thing we did was we reviewed the inspection reports from the past 10 years. So when the bridge inspectors go out there, they rate each of the components, the girders, the deck, the arch ribs, and give each element a score, a condition score. And so we took that information from the last 10 years, plotted it out to check and see how it was progressing, if there's any trends. And those two things are based on what's on the outside, but we needed a little more information, so we also did a core sampling project. So ITD had one of the current contractors go take some core samples out of the bridge, and they were tested in a lab, specifically looking for material composition as well as chloride concentrations. And then the last thing we did was we did look at scenarios for what does the future of the bridge look like? What would it cost if the bridge was to be kept? So looking at the 2006, as I mentioned, there was a chloride extraction that was done. And the reason why we focus on chlorides is they mostly come from salts, but it really drives the corrosion process. Metal in salt water deteriorates faster than, fresh water or dry. And so when those chlorides get in there, that accelerates the corrosion of the steel, and that accelerates the deterioration of the concrete with spalling and all the other things that go along with it. So we have a few slides. We don't have all of them. The existing evaluation report has more comparison photos, but we have a few samples in here. So on the left is the 2006. You could see everything is fairly clean and uniform. So that same area on the right that I took last year, you could see there's a whole lot of deterioration happening, a lot of discoloration on the deck up top. More efflorescence coming through. That's the white stuff. That's like the calcium leaching out of the concrete paste. Again, another one here, floor beams. Those are those transverse members that run across. I can't say whether or not this is identical location, but it very well might be. But the general condition on the left is what they all looked like. And the condition on the right is what many of them looked like last year. And as Jason mentioned, the maintenance project that is happening now is addressing some of these worst locations. This is a picture focusing on the rib. That's the arch itself. So on the left, that was their access platform that they used to perform repairs as well as to do that chloride extraction. And you can see on the right that there's still a lot of corrosion staining coming out of the concrete. You could see the spalling and the corroding rebar that's there. Just from the discoloration, you can tell that there's really a lot of activity happening inside that concrete. from a corrosion perspective. So that was the comparison to 2006. This is the plot of the conditions of each of the elements. So you can see good is at the top, severe is at the bottom. That's a 1 to 4 scale. And year is the horizontal scale. So we went back to 2016 up to 2024. And you can see most things are trending down. Notably the railings, which is that upper orange line. Those were new railings that were installed in 2006. And so they're all in good condition and really nothing's changed. But another notable thing would be the arch. This guy here, this purple line, is definitely taking, I don't want to call it a nosedive, but a pretty steep decline over the past few years. And several of the other ones, like the columns, are also declining quickly. So it's clear to see that the deterioration is ongoing. It's a steady rate of decline, and it's probably going to increase in that rate. As I mentioned, we also did some material testing. So there were core samples taken from each of the different elements of the bridge, the columns, the arch ribs, the deck, because traffic needs to be off lab of the existing bridge. Looking for material, so any of this work wouldn't happen until as well as 2030, 2031 after the new bridges. So is done. And again, that really gives you the picture of what's happening inside the concrete existing bridge. No matter what we do with it, necessarily traffic is all going to be using the new bridge. Typically, the chloride, so the first thing we looked at was, and what you'll see is that we saw the deck had a whole lot of chlorides in the surface because that's where the chlorides are getting in. It's been resurfaced. And then as you go deeper, the concentration gets a little bit lower because it hasn't migrated that far. Similarly, and what happens is as that higher concentration gets to the chlorides, then the fluorines, as we saw in those pictures, corrosion accelerates. Have a lot of active you have corrosion. More falling. So what we found is that are underneath the joints in all locations, water comes down, the chloride levels were pretty high already at the level of the steel. So really, and these are all, I'd say, that correlated well to the active or narrow elements we saw on the outside. So if you wanted to get in there and try to confirm what we thought has chlorides in it, didn't really tell us very quickly get to the middle of the member. And you're going at it from both sides. So to summarize, so before you know it, the evaluation of the existing bridge. So this, the chloride extraction they did in this scenario essentially includes replacement of everything because corrosion is ongoing. Themselves. The hope they're really the most defining feature of the bridge was to extend the life of the bridge. This scenario was the most extreme. So they were one end of replacing level, I would say, was temporarily reduced, but now it's obviously the arch ribs would also need full concrete replacement around the surface. Figured out that deterioration of about 6 inches widespread. It's extensive to remove. It's going to continue at an accelerating rate that are there. The chloride levels throughout the bridge, and because the ribs are getting that repair, the only thing that's still over, and I'll bring it up now because it's kind of like a candy shell over the 100-year-old some other later discussions. You're going to have some more stringers, or the girders, we have another round of repairs, longitudinal elements slated in under the deck. 27. They had mostly lower chloride levels. In today's dollars, because $25 from that option would cost $20 million. The deck shields them from a lot of that salt penetration. And I want to explain a little bit how that number, how those numbers was coming through. A lot of those ends were deteriorating, and again, that's some of the things they're addressing. Particularly for the future costs in 2070. Those account for really the conclusion is preserving the bridge or keeping the bridge, as well as like investment is going to return on investment. Would take a lot of effort and a lot of cost. That $20.3 million. We can't just leave it. How much do we have to put in the bank? We're going to build a new bridge. We can't just leave it. The anticipated future work. We can't have it. So there's a little bit of pieces falling down. You put money in the bank, you make any other more money than inflation, hopefully. But that's standard like engineering economics. So we took that information and said, okay, well, to do the work in 2070, you'd have to put if we had $3 million in the bank today. That was really the best way to compare these 3 scenarios since they have future work. So we looked at 3 different scenarios. So they're all and they kind of range from most extreme and then to be able to one in the middle. So this option is 20.3. It's important to point out that none of these were, I'll call most repairs, notably, none of this work could be done replace nearly all of the existing bridge until after the new bridge is built. All the concrete that you see and whatever gets completed after this would all be new. So that brings us to scenario 2, which is let's try to keep as much as we can of the existing bridge. And only replace those elements that are really needed. So again, we have the deck getting replaced. We have several columns that are getting replaced. Some of those bracing members that you saw in some of those photos that were really deteriorated, those would get replaced. The remainder of the items would just be receiving repairs. That includes the ribs, the stringers, the abutments, several items like that. So really the goal here again was keep as much as we can. Now this is a lot more expensive, and that may seem strange, but that's because doing repair work is a lot more labor intensive than replacing things. It's a lot easier to take out a whole big piece and put back a whole big new piece. But when you're working around existing material, trying to chip away things, trying to temporarily hold things up while you remove things, it's a lot of extra work that goes into it. So this was our middle of the road option. Comes at a cost of $50 million in today's dollars. So our last option was, wow, that's really expensive. What can we do to try to minimize the amount of work and just try to repair things kind of as has been done up to this point? Like as things deteriorate, let's do some work to it. So this one, like I said, we have those conditions, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 being the worst, 1 being good that we saw in that plot. So we said for this one, let's just repair things that are in a condition state 3, which is the bad but not worst. And as things progressively get to that repair state, they would get repaired. So you end up having, more repaired things in the future, 20, 40, 50, 60, 75. So there's a lot more work. It's spread out over a longer amount of time. But the end result is your cost is about the same as the middle of the road option. So we did say we can put off replacing the deck till 2050, but in the end, it's still pretty expensive. So that brings us to now what do we do? And I'm going to pass it back to Jason.
Tim, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So that's taking the maintenance aspect of those 3 scenarios is really taking out the usage of salt because we don't have to salt it anymore and 0 traffic on that road. And we still feel that it deteriorates at that pace.
When you repair old concrete that will still have some amount of chlorides in it, an interesting thing happens when you have concrete with chlorides and concrete without chlorides. It actually creates a bit of a potential, like a battery. And so at that interface, you can actually get some accelerated corrosion. So you're right, there probably wouldn't be salting it, but it probably can't just be left to have 8 feet of snow pile up on it. So it's gonna be taken care of. But I think you're right. It wouldn't, without having the truck traffic on it and without having it being regularly salted, it would deteriorate less than if it was continued in use.
That's a great question. Thank you. We'd already concluded that the 1933 bridge wasn't going to be carrying the traffic moving forward. Our conclusion, and we've spent a lot of time poring over these results, discussing with the team, discussing internally, our conclusion is that the best course of action is to recommend removal of this bridge. That's not something we come to lightly, and there are multiple reasons that bring us to that decision. Cost is certainly a consideration, but it is not the primary consideration. The costs in all scenarios of this are significant. They rival the cost of a new bridge, or in some cases over time will exceed the cost of a new bridge. So they can't be dismissed, but that is certainly not our only consideration. We really have given a lot of thought to what is feasible to do and what is a reasonable thing to ask the public to expect to see us do. So some of these scenarios, like the last one you saw, would have us doing work on this bridge every 10 years and disturbing traffic and the environment and having to put time and effort into maintaining this bridge. The fact that the bridge isn't in use as a transportation asset means that it's really just there as a landmark and for its historic purpose. And while that's significant, it is something that some of our stakeholders would question as far as whether that's a good use of your transportation dollar to maintain something that's really there for historic and landmark purposes. And then we also, as we weigh this, have to keep in mind the environmental side of this. So there are environmental laws that pertain to the preservation of historic resources and this bridge in particular. So this bridge being on the National Register of Historic Places, we're really needing, as we move forward, to deal with two different environmental laws that pertain to this. Section 106 is a term that we use to title the National Historic Preservation Act, and that's a process that we work through with SHPO as far as what the impacts and effects of this are, as well as what mitigation would come from our proposed action. And we'll be working on coordinating with SHPO on this. There is also it's called a 4F evaluation needed. 4F is a particular title of a particular federal law that has to do with historic and recreational resources. And we need Federal Highways approval as well to do what's called to use the historic resource under Section 4F. The proposed removal is not the final word on this. It is ITD's staff's recommendation at this point, but there are additional processes and approvals that we'll need to work through to do that. And of course, your comments are always welcome on that proposed action as well as we move forward with this. So at this point, I think we've been up here talking for a while. We're going to take a break and we're going to give you the opportunity to weigh in on your comment sheet. So we have an opportunity for you to comment at this point on what your thoughts are with regard to the evaluation or proposed action on the existing bridge.
And questions. If you have more questions, now's
Yes,
time.
please.
So, one of the things I think that we'd be really interested in having you tell us a little more about the new bridge, because a lot of us care about the historical significance. And we use words like, gee, I hope you build a replica of the old bridge. So, if the old bridge, existing bridge is left in place, is that going to affect the new bridge as we're driving upstream? Could you talk a little bit about that?
That's something that we were really in tune with from the very onset of this project. So it's one of the things that clear back at that feasibility phase we looked at. And one of the things that we were careful to do was to see if there was a feasible way of an arch-shaped form, that rib that makes the main element of the bridge, if we could have a similar shape and size rib in a new bridge construction. And as you'll see, most of the design alternatives have some manner of rib or arch form in them. There's one where it's a little bit different, a little bit bigger, and we'll get into that detail. But as far as what impression that might leave the viewer with, that has been called by some of our staff the double rainbow, if you will. So in that fortunate rainstorm, when the sun comes out and you ever get a double rainbow, I guess it's owing to that. Whether or not that's aesthetically pleasing or not, I don't know that any two individuals would agree, but we can give you a sense, and we do have, as we open up some of the exhibits of the new bridge, we've kind of left a ghost or a shadow of the old bridge in there. So I think you'll get a sense for what that's going to look like. We can make that more prominent if that's a point of concern for people, but you'll see elements of that.
Scenarios, we left the shadow of the old bridge, so you'll be able to see the new design and the shadow of the old bridge. So you may.
That's great. That would be really helpful.
Yeah.
And that was our deliberate intent in doing that. We want you to have a sense of where it is in relative to the old bridge, the size and the scale, the shape, and give you the ability to evaluate, if they were both there, what that would look like.
Are we running any numbers on like removal cost? That's staff recommendation. What's the cost for removal of the bridge?
I think we had determined like $3 million, $2 to $3 million, something like that.
And we've done some of the preliminary engineering on that. The detailed removal plan and costing would be a final design phase of the project. So while we've looked at it as a element of practicality, I don't know that we have the final estimate on that, but an order of magnitude certainly. And it's in that few $1 million range. Over here, please.
Has ITD explored the possibility, at least addressing the cost concerns here, of keeping one lane open and using the existing bridge and then having an additional like southbound lane using the new bridge. Is that something that was explored so that way you could, I guess, keep it in the system and get some maintenance funding through that?
It's certainly something that we've discussed internally. I don't know that we've gone into anything like a formal analysis of that. One of the reasons for that is even as a single lane bridge, that geometry of the existing bridge is quite restrictive. And so that scenario you describe is sometimes called a couplet. It's used commonly with systems of one-way streets where you'll have a northbound and a southbound or an east and a west. You could certainly have a pair of bridges that worked as one-way couplets as well. But I think what you'll find is that the geometry getting on and off of that existing bridge is still going to be quite restrictive. And there's some other design standards that are perhaps less obvious to people, but that are very important to us, such as sight distance. So being able to see far enough in the roadway ahead that you could stop if there were a disabled vehicle or a rock in the road or something. We would have some distance concerns with that as well. It's not something that we've thoroughly evaluated at this point because we pretty quickly ruled that out because of the geometric concerns.
We did very briefly take an overlay of the new geometry and one lane of it and overlaid it on top of the existing bridge to see if there was any possibility. And it was very far off from being able to fit the new design criteria onto the existing structure, even for just one lane.
So if this is removed, what are the opportunities to use it someplace else, even if it's just for a walking bridge in Valley County to preserve that history of it? I know, you couldn't rehab it to use it for car purposes, but what about just a walking bridge?
A great question, and it's one that we've gotten with some frequency, so I appreciate you bringing that up, Commissioner. There's a couple elements of that. If you've noticed, there are sections of the original rail that are sitting up at, it used to be called OK Gravel, up in the valley, right? And so certainly elements of the bridge could be preserved or utilized as landmarks or monuments. As far as the bridge in its entirety, concrete bridges of this nature were cast in place, so they were formed and poured in their final location. And as such, there are no joints or bolts or rivets that you could disassemble and move in small pieces. So while it may be careful to more carefully disassemble the bridge by cutting concrete or torching bar and moving it in segments, the process of reassembly would be technically difficult, if not infeasible. And then a bridge of this nature has a very specific set of dimensions. And so unless you had a place where you were trying to bridge a canyon or an elevation that was the same height, same width, same aspect ratio, any particular bridge may not fit. So shorter span bridges, truss type bridges are things that we can move whole or disassemble and reassemble are definitely candidates for reuse, and that happens with some regularity. Cast in place concrete bridges, the general consensus is that it's just not feasible to relocate those. But certainly it would be feasible to preserve elements of it. So we could keep parts of columns or railings or things if we wanted to keep parts of the bridge around.
Have you considered, if you take the bridge out, doing some sort of historical monument, just something recognizing that bridge and the history and et cetera in that area somewhere?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a well-established practice. Most of the historic markers on the state highway system have been honoring some sort of history or a similar type of a process. I think the Rainbow Bridge certainly is one that would warrant having its story told and having some interpretive signage or information available about it. We have a lot of details of the original bridge's construction and things that we could incorporate into such an exhibit. That's one of the many things that we consider as we talk about potential mitigation is what we can do to honor that history.
Yeah, so I see your cost on repairing the bridge, but if you were to repair the bridge simply for pedestrian use, roadside attraction, historical significance, would there also not be significant additional costs for like the acceleration lanes, parking lanes, and all the other associated amenities you have to put into the new bridge design?
That's a great question, and it's probable that there would be. We've stopped short of estimating any of those right now because there's not a readily apparent place to even put such facilities. So one of the things, and it's hard to conceive of the scale of these things if you don't deal in this all the time, but something like a deceleration lane on a 55-mile-per-hour road is hundreds of feet long. And so you would need sufficient width to decelerate traffic, to make a turn into something like a parking area or observation point. And the opportunities for those at this location are just practically non-existent. If you've noticed where people park along the existing bridge, they use a wide section of shoulder and it fits 2 or 3 cars. And we cringe every time we see it because, boy, we really hope they watch carefully when they get back into traffic. It's not really designed for that. Anything that we would put in place as an observation point or an overlook or things would have to be designed to current standards, and it would be quite large and technically challenging to find a place for that.
Essentially be additional costs to these estimates.
They would, and those could be substantial. So your instinct is good, is that those are not in those current estimates right now, and that could be a significant cost as well.
So, obviously there's a lot of, emotion around the bridge and et cetera. So is there an opportunity if the final recommendation is to remove it for considerably less money? Since we're not going to spend $20 to $50 million to maintain an old bridge, which is probably going to actually cost more than that, right? In lieu of, we're going to make Highway 55 safer for you to drive on with turn lanes, passing lanes, turnouts from Round Valley to McCall, because there's one, and the road isn't safe. The traffic flow is still going to get clogged up, on weekdays, not just holiday weekends, to help maybe in lieu of we're going to dedicate these funds to make Highway 55 safer.
So that's a good question, and I'm pleased to report that ITD has recently undertaken a study to identify exactly where the opportunity for such improvements in Long Valley and Round Valley exist. Our board was generous enough to authorize that study here in last year. We have consulted with a team that's going to look at doing that, and their specific charge is to find places like passing opportunities, turn lanes, and safety improvements. Whether or not those would ever be part of formal mitigation for the bridge, I have my doubts, because formal mitigation for a historic resource is usually supposed to have something to do with historic transportation, or at least historic topics in general. However, there is such a thing as opportunity cost. So avoiding that $20+ million investment is money that ITD would then have more readily available for other purposes. So we balance our budget in total statewide, and it is a fixed budget from your fuel taxes and registrations and things. And so any costs that we would avoid here would open up opportunities for investment other places. And Long Valley, Round Valley, Highway 55 generally is a place that we have targeted for such improvements. Not necessarily a direct link, but I think there's definitely an indirect one.
I work for Idaho Transportation Department, work for Shauna and Jason here. It's an absolute privilege to be part of this project. It's definitely a lot of fun, a lot of challenges, just National Historic Bridge, signature bridge, definitely some good experiences throughout this. So, I'm going to walk through the location, the roadway, and the conceptual walls we're thinking about on this project. Kind of walking through this, a projected aerial view of the new roadway compared to the old one, and the new bridge alignment compared to the old one. And so, as you can see, throughout a lot of investigation and geotechnical work and looking at both sides of the whole bridge and maintaining traffic, this seemed to be the best location just northwest upstream of the old Rainbow Bridge. So some of the improvements on we have for the new bridge would be two 12-foot lanes, which is curb to curb with the old bridge right now. 14-foot shoulders across the new bridge. Some of the reasons for the wider shoulders would be one, we're trying to improve that sight distance around there, trying to improve the speed going through there, and just the overall comfort of driving through there. Also, there's so much traffic nowadays on that road, and as if you've traveled anywhere lately, right now we're working on the old Rainbow Bridge, and we usually have one lane restricted. It's pretty tight in there. So for the new bridge and the 14-foot shoulders is so if we do inspections or maintenance in the future, we can maintain those lanes of traffic and have less of an effect on the traveling public, which would be a huge benefit going forward. The shoulders will be up to 17 feet on the curves before and after the bridge. That just helps getting through there. And then as I mentioned, curb to curb of the old bridge is 24 feet. So we don't even have any shoulders on the old bridge. So it's definitely tight driving through there, driving your RV through there, or if you're working on there. It's people are working out there, and we got it restricted to 12-foot lanes in the truck traffic. It's kind of we got to keep people safe while they're working. It's pretty interesting. So anyway, walking into these retaining walls, part of the retaining walls that we're coming up with above and below the bridge is to accommodate the improved geometry and the alignment for better visibility with sharp curves, and to make room for the 2 lanes of traffic of construction, and ensure we're stabilizing the canyon walls to ensure that what we're doing there will work for maintaining that hillside. So to make this alignment, certain parts of this wall would be up to 100 feet high. So to do this, we're limited to the height of each section of wall to about 40 feet. And so at the highest point, there'd be 2 40-foot sections, and then above that would be another 20-foot panel above that. So you can kind of see conceptually, and I got some pretty good slides going forward. We'll show some of these in different views, but that'll allow us to get it moved over. That'll allow us to maintain the traffic while we build the new bridge. And so we had some pretty good walls going in there just on the west side, and down below on the riverside also.
One second. So in the books that we hand out are the same graphics that Stan's going through. They're blown up, and you do have comment sheets to ask about your opinion on these aesthetics that you're going to go through. So I just wanted you to know they're in the books.
And we're mainly looking at, with all these concepts, the design is pretty much the same. The part you can't see, but these concepts are showing some different options for how this will look aesthetically, and that's what we're looking for some input on also. So this first option, the first concept, we call this the natural finish. So the idea, and these are just conceptual, the idea is when we're building this wall, the final view of it has a natural look of the natural settings of the current rock structure as you're driving by right now, what you see going down through that canyon. So that would be the idea, and so we're just trying to show how maybe a natural finish would look going through this area as you're approaching. So,
Ask a question.
Yes.
So we already know what just happened.
Yeah, some lessons learned there.
And this doesn't look natural to me either.
Right.
Is there a way to set that back a little bit and at least put a row of trees in front of it or some kind of planting so that
Great
You're
comment.
softening
Make sure
that
you write it on your
wall.
comment sheet.
We absolutely have had some of those discussions that gets some of the geotechnical and some of the designers on the wall. Initially, it's a hard no, but we've actually been talking about breaking it up, maybe putting some kind of shrubbery or trees in there. We're not sure if that's practical or not in regards to design and the damage it could be do behind those walls or on those benches, but those discussions are happening. And I think that would be a good comment. That would, sharpen our pencils and see if something like that might be able to happen. Also, as we're walking through this, if we can't do something like what you're saying, maybe we can put, you can do form liners, you can do aesthetics, you can put imprints of something on there. Like some of these options aren't natural finish, and so maybe if you're in some other cities and you see some of these big walls, they got some unique designs, or the design on the wall is a landscape. And so those are concepts that possibly could happen. And so go ahead.
Is that material concrete that you're lining the wall with? So yeah, you could do an impression of the Rainbow Bridge in that wall.
In my opinion, that's possible. It would be, whether it was like this type of wall with an imprint in it, it's pretty much like a form liner, or they would build it like, as I go forward here, we're going to show the concept of panels and some things, those panels could have form liners on them and things of that nature. So those are definitely good comments. I think we're looking for some of that type of input on these comment sheets.
Okay, and forgive me, I know nothing about engineering, but where y'all just did all of that work, and it looks so horrid, and it still had some failure, what's going to keep this now from being?
In regards to this design, this is a different type of a design, and so there's been some pretty good geotechnical and structural engineering going on behind the scenes. And I do have some examples on my seat here in regards to what's behind the scenes on these walls. We just constructed similar walls on 95 because of that closure. And so we do, what you can't see here is shoulder piles that are anchored back into rock. And so like one of the conceptual designs, like on this first bench, is a shoulder pile wall that is also anchored with rock anchors connected to it. So it's pretty an extremely structural sound design throughout this section here. Down below the roadway, we also have structural pile walls. They're deeper into rock, so we don't need the tiebacks. And then as we go up, the walls change to rock anchors and just, shotcrete. There's not the shoulder piles as we get higher. It's more of a rock anchor shotcrete, and then we do the surface texture, and so it looks the same or similar as we get a little higher, and we have different structural requirements as we walk up the hillside. So hopefully that was close to answering that question.
Put these on the other stuff that still looks like rock? Just asking.
We are
And it's failing?
exploring options for that failure point as far as how we can restore that and what the future of that's looking like. So there'll be more on that part.
Those are rock cuts, right? As
Yeah,
opposed
rock
to
cuts.
walls. These are different.
Those are the differences.
These are walls, they're different rock cuts.
A couple more views of that natural finish. And then on the second concept we have here, this would be kind of like we call it the panel finish. So it doesn't have that outside natural finish on it. So like you could do form liners, or you could do something with the panels as you go up, and then the other levels could be finished to look the same too. So looks kind of like you're in a prison. So no worries. I mean, we're just kind of showing general concepts. These aren't final designs, obviously. We're just kind of showing concepts. You know, the aesthetics and architecture will come through design, and so again, this is a panel finish type of concept. Here's a couple different views if you're driving through and coming from Boise or from McCall. And so just kind of giving you a feel for those. So again, I think we're looking for comments and, you know, even beyond, you know, like we like the natural finish, but we want a form liner, or we want something like the Rainbow Bridge, or even with this, you know, we want to hear your comments on them. Third concept on these walls is we call this the stacked finish. So you're kind of getting some similarity in regards to the type of walls, the type of aesthetics we could have. This is just, you know, different types of finishes we could do. You can do form liners in this also. And so here's a couple more concepts, a couple more views of this type of finish. So you know, at the highest point, you know, all these segments aren't the same length, but you know, we do get up there about 100 feet high. So they're pretty significant walls. It's allowing us to maintain traffic, improve the geometry, stabilize the slopes, and you know, help us control snow and mitigating future activity of the hillside.
And I asked, so right now, is there snow plowing occurring and the salt is being spread with the snow plow? What's going to happen to that wall? Is it just going to mark it?
You're talking about, is it going to stain it, or is it going to still look nice? If we go through there and plow just like what we do today, I think depending on the finish and what we have there, it's going to determine on how well it holds up. It's maybe these pictures aren't really telling the full story of how much the distance is. There's going to be storage and pretty good sized shoulders, so I'm not really sure if it's really going to get splattered with snow all the way over there. These are pretty good sized shoulders going through there.
I can't remember the number offhand, but it might be 8 to 10 feet.
Well, they're spreading right now 20 to 30 feet. So
I believe, you know, there is obviously the potential of osprey and snow getting all the way over to the wall.
And there are concrete sealers that can be used, and this is fortunately an easy location to access for you to be able to maintain it. So if there's a place that needs concrete sealing, this is the ideal place.
Do all these concepts have roughly similar construction and maintenance costs? Structurally, are they fundamentally the same and it's just the surface that's different?
That's correct.
Okay.
Pretty much it for the walls. We can definitely take some questions and sorry.
Question on the wall. I've noticed in neighboring states, they've done these walls when they widen their freeways, and the nearest town's 40 miles away, and within 2 years they're graffitied badly, and they've left it, and it ruins the mountain, you know, concept, the rustic. Is there any plans? I live in the Treasure Valley, and I know we had that new overpass, and I think when it was installed, it was graffiti proofed, correct?
We have some pretty good looking walls that we've done up, and I would say US 12, maybe up by I-90. We've looked at some of those concepts, really like on the natural finish side. Looks pretty darn good. Some of the vegetation has come in and the walls aren't this big. I'm not really seeing any graffiti or anything like that. Opportunity to stop here with traffic flows.
Go to neighboring Washington State, I-5, speed limit's 65 miles an hour, and there's graffiti every 100 feet all over their exit signs and everything, so it doesn't matter about stopping or whatever, they walk. They climb over the things.
Determined graffiti artists are very hard to stop. It's, like trying to cage a cat.
So what I was referring to originally was I-90. They put all these beautiful walls like you're talking on I-90 at the top of Snoqualmie Pass, and they've been tagged now.
I think that is an important consideration, Dan. ITD makes fairly extensive use of anti-graffiti coatings, particularly in urban areas where graffiti is more prominent. The reason you don't see more of it is we also respond to it very quickly because graffiti begets graffiti. So we get that covered up usually, within days or weeks, and that tends to stem the problem. So at least some graffiti is done competitively. It's a tagging problem or turf war. That tends to be a more urban scenario, but one of the ways that you mitigate graffiti is by getting it covered up quickly. And so I think what Dan McCaffrey mentioned was some of the coating options. Most of those coating options also aid in graffiti removal, either by being washable or by be recoatable, so that you can alleviate that quickly. So we haven't had a big prevalence of that in rural areas, but it does happen, and it's something that we stay on top of.
What's your suggestion?
I suggest that the coating like you guys did on 84 in Caldwell for the graffiti be done on that stuff. Because I know from, in my, don't want to show my actual age, but in my early 20s, I used to own a pressure washing business. And you go on a structure like that, surface, and it's hard to remove graffiti with the pressure washer.
I do think it's a lot easier with the graffiti coating. Like on State Highway 16 right now, we're definitely putting that on some of them MSC walls and things that we're doing. And so I think it's a good suggestion. I think it's worth a comment, and I think it would be an easy lift for these whatever type of walls or concepts we do to put the graffiti coating on.
And then there's towns 40 miles away, and you're seeing all this tagging and graffiti, and it like ruins the mountain, like on I-90 now. It ruins the whole deal. They spent millions making walls like that, and to make them look a certain way, and now they're spray painted.
Definitely.
Could you maybe use like a darker material? I think like for me looking at this, it's so stark against the landscape, and it's like almost that white color. Is there a way you could use darker stone or?
Absolutely. I think, I do think these could be colored similar to the kind of rock we drive by through the canyon. I think you can make it any color you wanted. I think it's integral with when they put it on, when they spray it on, and so it's it's better than like a stain that can fade over time. So I definitely think that's absolutely doable.
That would help with the salt wash too.
I agree. Dan said earlier.
I mentioned, the NF graffiti and the top coating is very minor compared to the rest of the project. So we do it all the time. I love to hear this, but it's a really easy thing, and you can make that decision as we go forward on what colors, and we really appreciate these comments, and we will consider them.
Even with form liners and things of that nature, that it works well for all that. That's it for me.
So Dan, as you start in your book, there's a table of contents, and there is a checkered beginning of this that has all 9 of these laid out, and then subsequent pages. So if you want more detail as he's talking, you can get into the books.
A lot of what is a continuation of what was shared at the last meeting that we had together last year. We talked about a few different bridge types. We talked about a girder option, and we talked about concrete arches, and we talked about steel arches. All of the bridges have to fit the location. So not every bridge type makes sense at every location. So like a big suspension bridge doesn't really make sense here. A cable stay bridge doesn't really make sense here. Based on the topography, a girder bridge makes sense, an arch bridge makes sense. So we really focused on those types of things. And the design life of the bridge, typical 75 years plus, sometimes it's 100 years. So for probably a bridge like this at this location, we would be aiming for a 100-year design life. I think the important thing from this slide is just that hey, all of the options that you see are constructible, are maintainable, are within the costs that ITD is considering for the budget for this project. And the important part is we do want to hear what you like about the bridges, not just, hey, I like option 1 or option 3, but also why or what aspects of it that you like, because we have 9 that are shown here. We'll probably end up going with option 10, and that's some combination of what and based on your input. So make sure you let us know about materials, whether concrete or steel, shapes or form that you like. Things like that would be really helpful to us to narrow things down for the next phase. So here's the 9 options. The first one is the only steel girder option. Then we have several steel arches and we have several concrete arches. I don't need to describe them here. I'll just talk about them as we get to them. So the first one is really like the baseline girder bridge that is more like a typical Idaho bridge. It's not necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing, but like Jason said, everyone's eye is different. But this, it fits the space. It only has 3 spans, so not very many piers. It's haunched as opposed to just straight, and so that just means that at the piers it dips down a little bit. It gets deeper. You could maybe see it a little bit right here. It's hard to see in this picture, but on the next views you can see a little bit better. So it has a little bit of a archy feel to it, but it's still a girder bridge. Like I said, it's the simplest one, and along with that means the easiest future maintenance, because everything's just flat and there's not a lot of detail to it. So it's the easiest to paint or clean or repair in the future.
Can you explain what the visual is on the first and the second? It's showing it in 2 different locations.
That's looking north or looking south?
Oh.
Yeah. So this is looking south. There's the ghost of the old bridge. Railroad's here. And that's looking north. So the old bridge is closer to you. So back up. So you can see the ghost of the bridge in the background, right? That's the existing bridge. So that's not 2 different locations. It's just looking north or south, because you have a little bit of a different perspective.
That's really helpful, by the way. It's really brilliant on your part to be able to show us both upriver, downriver, the ghost station, all of you. Very helpful.
Well, don't say so.
Quick question.
Yes.
As we're looking at these, like, I appreciate the concrete and steel. Can you tell us anything about maintenance? Like, is steel, like, from a reliability perspective, is a fully steel bridge like much more reliable? And I'm assuming the concrete, because it's porous, and adds some extra maintenance and potential failure spots. But
Yeah.
I'll talk very briefly on that, and I'll also, as I go through, I'll hit some of the specifics. But yeah, in general, concrete bridges have more massive elements, which means they're heavier, which means you need bigger equipment to erect the pieces. As Jason mentioned, the original bridge was cast in place, so it was formed in place. It's not really done so much anymore. Most things are precast, and so they would be shipped to the site in pieces, assembled. You put steel strands inside of them and tighten them up, and you have closure pores in between all the concrete pieces. In terms of maintenance, steel, you can bolt things to it to strengthen things, or if there's some deterioration, I would say it's a little bit easier to repair steel than it is concrete. Concrete is porous, and it does have steel inside of it, which we try to have some protection mechanism to the steel to protect it from like chloride penetration, things like that. Because of using precast elements, typically, concrete bridges that are assembled then usually are coated so they have a uniform appearance, because you'll have a little bit of a different concrete batch for each of the different pieces. They can have a slightly different color. You have closure pores in between the pieces, so it can look a little messy unless you coat it. So if you coat it, then that coating's going to wear out in 10 or 15 years. You're going to want to coat it again. So there's a little bit more work there. All of the steel options we've shown are brown looking. That's called weathering steel. So that's an uncoated weathering steel. It includes in its chemistry some things so that it forms a really strong patina. So as it gets a little bit of rust to it, it's a real dense layer that prevents further corrosion. So that's used a lot all around the world. It's not used in marine environments. It's not used in really low stream crossings because those aren't really good environments for it because it can get wet and never dry out. And so then you don't get that patina. But this location is well suited for weathering steel. So that just means you don't have to paint it. So you could paint it if you wanted to for a color or things like that, but you don't have to. That's probably enough general, but maybe there's a few more things I'll point out as we go. Okay, option 2 is, we'll call it a deck arch. So that just means it's under the deck. This is very similar to one of the ones that we showed last time, but we've done some more design to it. Things to point out, again, we have the arch shape. All the rest of the options are arches, so that honors the existing bridge. It's not a replica. It's a little more interesting. This particular steel arch has, I'll call it open eye sections. So like you would have on the girders, it has a top plate and a bottom plate with a web in between. So these pieces are all open eye shapes, which are easy to fabricate because you can put a plate in a plate and weld them together. It's pretty easy to get to, pretty easy to repair, pretty easy to keep clean. Some of the other shapes use boxes. Other options use box sections. These pieces would be relatively lightweight. So again, as compared to the concrete options, would require less equipment or smaller equipment. So in this really tightly constrained area, constructability, having lighter pieces is helpful.
Are those like concrete pier pads that the steel sits on?
Right here? Yeah. Yep, those would be concrete elements that go down as the foundation. And here's the same views, but of this particular alternative. They look a lot better in your book than they do here.
Could you point to there's a term used, spandrel, I believe it's pronounced. Could you point to those?
Yes.
As you come across those?
Yeah, so the spandrel terminology just has to do with the space between the roadway and the arch itself. So this one is called a 4 spandrel, so because there's 4 columns. There's 1, 2, 3, and then 4 over there. So there's 4 spandrel columns on the arch. Some of the other options have more. Some of the options that we're not showing you today that were previously eliminated had less. So that's what that means. Good question. Thank you.
Trying not to make this a bridge vocabulary test, but they do have technical meetings that are important on us. So.
There may be a quiz.
Okay, this option 3 is essentially the same exact bridge as what we just saw, except it's closed boxes. Some people may say that's a little more aesthetically pleasing because there's like less things sticking out, less lines, it's a little more uniform. But that does bring with it a few challenges because fabricating a box is a little bit more challenging than an eye section. Repairing a box is a little bit harder because you don't have access to, you can't stick your hand in it necessarily to grab the other end of a bolt. Welded boxes are used all over the place, so it's not an unusual thing, but it does carry some challenges. The boxes, because of the material, the way it is, it's a little bit more torsionally stiff and a little more resistant to buckling. So you might be able to use lighter pieces. So again, this maybe could use smaller equipment or more efficient use of material. Otherwise, it's very similar to the other open eye shape arch. Again, we have them in this particular order because it makes sense to talk about them in that way. This is very similar to the steel arches you saw so far, except that the arch rib in this case is concrete. It generally has the same shape as the steel arches. Nothing really notable. There's a little bit of different geometry just because of how they act, but nothing noteworthy. And we have this included just because the existing bridge is concrete. So why not have a new concrete arch as well as an option?
Is this at risk with the salt? And is steel going to hold up better with that salt application?
I think any of the options can hold up well, and any of the options can deteriorate. It all just depends on how much you take care of it.
One thing I'm going to mention, so just to let you know, I'm Mike Johnson, I'm the state bridge engineer. I'm in charge of maintaining the bridges here. And whether you use concrete or steel, you can get deterioration if you do it incorrectly. There are things you can do with concrete to make it last better, using stainless steel reinforcement. The salt skin and the concrete really have very little harming effect on it. It's the salts getting into the steel that causes corrosion, that causes expansion. That's where it is. You have the same problem with steel girders or steel elements, we call them, just different pieces. If they're made out of steel rust if you get salt into it. So really to help protect this, you look at mitigation measures, whether you use concrete with a coating or against concrete with stainless steel reinforcement, or you make sure, or you do techniques to keep the salt from coming off of the deck down to the underlying elements. That's the important thing. We have found in Idaho, we're very fortunate in the fact that we have a very dry climate, and it makes using steel suitable. But we're also in an area that we use salt to keep people safe. We don't use more salt than we need. We use the salt that we need to keep the traveling public safe. But that comes with some risks. So we just have to use correct measures to protect whether we use steel or concrete.
One of the benefits is the old bridge had a lot of joints, and the joints let the water come through and get to the members. And so we've had a lot of innovation in bridge design and analysis techniques that allow us to use a lot less joints than we used to, and it's keeping the water away from those members that will protect them.
Great question, though.
Are those spandrels steel or timber?
They are timber. And what, I'm sorry. You planted that in my mind.
They can be concrete too.
Yes, I have that written down as a point to mention. What we have shown is steel. It could be concrete columns on top of the concrete arch. Again, those are comments that you can say, hey, I really like this, but get rid of the steel columns. That could be a comment if you wanted to. This one we included as it's a historic bridge, similar architecture as the existing. Again, we did not want to build a replica of the existing bridge. So this has similar details, but slightly different. The outside girder line that has all the little arches to it, that's a little more archy than the existing bridge has. The shape of the arch, again, is similar in that it tapers up to something narrower at the top. So it pays homage to the existing, but doesn't copy it. More of a historic look. Again, in order to capture and build all of these little details effectively, there would likely be precast elements where you could really control the geometry very well and have a repeatable thing. So again, you run into the same challenges with using precast elements and connecting them all. That has a lot of spandrel columns. This one's a little bit different than all of the other arch options. So this is the only one that has an arch that actually goes above the roadway. So that means you see it a little bit better and from a little bit further. This arch, whereas all of the other arch options all have about the same span length, which is only a little bit bigger than the existing bridge, this one actually is a little longer. And you can see in the next ones that we span over the railroad a little bit here. So whereas the other ones I think have about a 200-foot span, this one has a 300, 340 something span. But it does have more steel exposed. So it does require a little bit more attention to maintenance and making sure that the details are good, don't capture the salt, things like that. So there's maybe a little bit more challenge because this has more structural material exposed, less protected from the deck.
I'm calling them leans. Are those an aesthetic element or is that structural?
Yes, they are structural. They're floor beams. The deck itself is supported by longitudinal elements. We call them stringers. They're supported by the transverse ones that are floor beams, which the hangers then hold up. So we have them sticking out a little bit further than maybe they would need to be, but we don't have the overall aerial view of this, but the arch ribs themselves aren't really parallel to the roadway because the road has a little bit of an S curve to it. So the ribs have to be outboard a little bit further. So that means there's a little bit more gap that those floor beams have to reach out to grab onto where the hangers are. So we couldn't quite bring the ribs in as close. So that's our first take on it. Obviously that could be adjusted if that was a comment. This is the spandrel braced arch. You can see it looks a bit like a truss, and a truss has those diagonal elements to it. Railroads use this type of bridge a lot because they're really robust. This one might actually be slightly easier to build than some of the other arch alternatives because you could cantilever out a little bit easier with the structure itself as you're building it. Whereas the other ones, we probably want to tie it back with something, other temporary supports. This one with the diagonals, you could use the diagonals to cantilever out. So this one might actually be a little bit easier to build, but it has a lot more smaller little pieces with a lot of connections. Lots of little connections tend to collect debris or dust or birds or snow. So it's a little bit harder to keep clean and maintain all of the little joints. So there's some pluses and minuses to this option. This one, again, uses a steel box for the arch ribs. And this is like the box one that we saw earlier, except we pulled the feet in a little bit to use a shared foundation. So it's a little bit more aesthetically interesting. You could say it's maybe a little bit more modern of a design, but the shared foundation is maybe a little bit more efficient and easier to build, less excavation, maybe a little bit more efficient. You can see the columns there. They're inclined as well instead of being vertical. So those things would probably all be boxes because those are a little bit more torsionally stiff, and that helps just with stability and design efficiency. Again, these views look a little bit better in your book. And the last one we have here is a concrete rib, but just one instead of two. So in this one, contrary to the previous one where it's narrow at the bottom and wide at the top, this one is wide at the base and narrow at the top, the concrete rib. So it's a single element. Again, it's a pretty massive piece, so you probably would end up needing some big equipment to erect the concrete part of this. Columns, again, could be concrete or steel, not timber. Let's see what else about this one. I'd say this one is pretty minimalistic. There's not a lot of connections, not a lot to maintain or catch debris. So this one might actually have a little bit less of maintenance efforts required.
Can I ask a question on all of them?
Yes.
They all have the support to go over the railroad, and it sticks out from the road quite a ways. So that's just flat gonna be a beam that you're gonna see sticking out in the middle of nowhere. So that has to be like that on all of them. So a way to shield that.
Generally, yes, it has to be that way because we have to span the railroad. And where the alignment crosses the railroad and where we can put down legs of the columns to support it, they don't line up. So you have to like put your leg over here so that you can span across to support the roadway. Could it be shielded? Like, we can include some details if one of those options gets selected. I think the through arch is the only one that doesn't really have that. Have snow get piled on it or other things, but from a visual perspective,
But an eagle's nest on the end of it. Everybody can watch the eagle.
The one that is distinct and that it doesn't have that
well, the other,
that beam. All the others do.
so
While we're on option 6, Dan, you know, one of the things that come to mind when we see this, there is an arch bridge north of Riggins. We call that the Goff Bridge or the Time Zone Bridge. That is a different type of bridge. We probably should have brought a picture of it. That bridge is called a tide arch, and you're driving through the whole arch on that bridge. It also has a bunch of cross elements across the top, so we've looked at that one relative to this one, and there may be a little bit of a similar feel driving through an arch like that, but they are quite distinct in their design if you were to see them side by side. So we don't think we're copying that one, but there will be, you know, some people that recognize that other arch. So some people that recognize that other arch. So
From a recreation perspective, floating that, this is one of the coolest ones just because it blows up that view underneath the bridge. Like, it's very cool.
Sure blocks the view. You know, there's two different colors that you're showing in your presentation too. One is a darker arch versus a lighter arch. So for that, is there
that has to do with the way the sun was in the rendering. So I think the sun is shining on this side and that's in the shadow on the other side.
sometimes these renderings will even almost over exaggerate the sunlight effect just to make the detail pop, but that's really just the color rendering from the sunlight. So let me reiterate what's been said. We really want meaningful input on these. I look at a lot of public comments from a lot of different types of projects, and we get a lot of comments that are middle of the road. Yeah, that'd be okay, or I'm generally okay with this or that. If there's something you really like, be sure and tell us that. If there's something you think is an absolute non-starter, if you think something is ugly or unmaintainable or doesn't fit the environment, doesn't match with the existing one, whatever the case is, if there's things that you just absolutely can't tolerate too, please let us know. The more you differentiate your comments, the easier it is for us to group them and to parse them into what we're gonna take forward. So we all have our preferences, and like I've said, we don't all agree. So we're looking for some help on this, and hopefully we've given you a good sampling of what's possible and what would fit in this location. So we will, as a next step, be spending quite a bit of time reviewing your input and the public input we get here in a couple of weeks. So that is important to us. We will definitely take all of that into account and be poring over those. That is also important in the environmental process, and completing the environmental process is one of the next steps in the project. So we need to get through that Section 4F and the 106 process, as well as our general documentation process for this project. So that really is a next step that we'll be working on in the coming months. We will need to make final decisions about the existing bridge. So as I've mentioned, we're making a recommendation today for removal. We do that with a little bit of a heavy heart. We like this bridge a lot. But that final decision will need to be made, and that'll be a next step as well, is working with our partner agencies and getting to a final conclusion on that. And we will come back for another round of input on the final design. So whatever comes out of the comments today and out of this process, we will tie that back into a final design, and then we will be bringing that back again for one more round of input and comments before we move this toward construction. So we really appreciate everybody's time and attention today. We do want your input not only on the bridges, but on the walls as well. And we haven't brought it up yet, but there will be more details that we'll show you in close-ups and things next time. So we haven't focused, for example, on something that people see a lot, which is the bridge railing. And we spent quite a bit of time putting in place a historic copy of the railing on the current bridge. So things like the railing will be elements that we'll show you when we get to a final design for, I won't call those alternatives, but maybe sub-alternatives, right? There'll be little elements like that, or if we need to talk about colors or textures or anything like that, we'll be talking about that at that final design stage. So any other questions that we can respond to right now?
I don't know if this is relevant at this point, but to what extent is there a significant cost difference between these different designs and maintenance? Like, for example, the multi-spandrel Art Deco, like, it
looks
great,
expensive, doesn't it?
but is that like a 5 times more expensive bridge than the most simple one of these 9, or what is the range here?
We don't think there are any of the alternatives that we presented today that would be a multiplier like 3 or 5 times. There are minor cost differences in these. Sometimes those are offsetting. So sometimes what you might save in initial construction, you might pay in maintenance over time, or vice versa. I would say these are all very similar order of magnitude cost. So if we threw things 10 or 20% either way, that might be a lot. A lot of the costs of this project will be just mobilizing to the site. Any work that we do such as removing the existing bridge, would be a fixed cost in all alternatives. The wall system is all generally the same, but for just the face finishings and things. So I don't know that you're going to see a big swing in cost either in initial construction or in maintenance between these. They'll all be similar, I think.
You may have covered this, but is durability the same with all these designs? They're going to go 50, 75 years, or?
These will all be designed to be 75 or 100-year designs, and this is a bridge type location where we look on the longer end of that. Achieving that is something where we put all of our best strategies forward. So Mike mentioned some of the coatings that we use. It was mentioned that we are careful about how we handle drainage nowadays. The location of the joints on the existing bridge made a whole lot of sense if you thought about how you build a bridge like that. Is a disaster for its long-term viability, right? That's exactly the wrong place to put them, and so we won't do that again. So we'll employ all the tricks of coatings and design elements and things to make sure that we have the maximum durability that we can for what we're building here. And I think it's safe to say we'll easily achieve 75. 100 shouldn't be out of the question on a new bridge.
Just a quick shout out. I really appreciate all the work that went into this design book. So it's really helpful to all of us. It's really professionally done. I'm sure it's not inexpensive, but well worth it. It's really great to be able to follow along. And I really like the thought that went into the range of alternatives and the naming of them. Subtle things like that are really helpful to those of us that are engineers in the audience. So thank you. It's been great.
I appreciate that. I've got to give all the credit to the team for that. We had a vision of developing some very diverse and thoughtful alternatives, but the team has really turned it into a product that we're pretty proud of, and we certainly hope conveys the breadth of alternatives that we're looking at here. All right. We definitely do want to give you time to make comments. Please, if you have any remaining questions, grab one of us, but we'd love to get your comments and feedback, and that'll extend through the public comment period as well. Encourage those of you to weigh in as well if they've got an idea on this or a strong opinion. So thank you again.